Good evening and welcome everyone to another Loft Talk here on spiritual science as social activism and self-initiation. Very excited tonight, very excited with tonight's talk. The title being The Maya Matrix, Artificial Intelligence, and the Christ Sun Hero Archetype. As usual, there's a real mouthful in the title and lots more to come out of the mouth on this juicy subject. To start off, I just want to say that I have been a fan of the Matrix films from the beginning. The first one came out in 1999, was actually released on March 31st, which was the last Easter of the second millennium, which I do believe ties in to some of the thematic things we'll be looking at. And I have watched it over and over and over again, all three of them, The Matrix, Part 2, The Matrix Reloaded, and Part 3, Matrix Revolutions, because I just found that they were so deep and kept reminding me of important spiritual truths that are helpful in guiding us in living. So here we are, December 5th, 2018. I'm still watching it, still learning from them. As a matter of fact, we watched Part 1 and Part 2 here just over the past few weeks. We'll be watching Part 3 here on Saturday, December 15th. And, well, if you like Christmas movies, you might find that The Matrix kind of fits as a Christmas movie. I mean, you like the Bible, you know, from Genesis to Revelation. You like deep stories with lots of twists and turns and a pantheon of characters and mysterious, esoteric symbolism and so forth. Well, the Matrix Trilogy is like that too. So tonight, we are going to be bringing esoteric biblical symbolism together with the Matrix Trilogy. Because I do believe that the Wachowski brothers, who made the trilogy, who are no longer the Wachowski brothers, they're the Wachowski transgendered, I think that they brought something really important through in their very first film. It was the very first work at making films. And while they may not be on the same level of, say, the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, I do think what's important is that these films do stimulate the imagination. They stimulate our creative juices and awaken inner knowing. So, yes, it is kind of appropriate to talk about this at this time of year because we're into the season of the Festival of Lights, and many of the traditional religions are, of course, we have Christmas coming up in a few weeks, which is, you know, celebrating the birth of the Christ child. But of course, December 25th was kind of co-opted by the Christians. It originally had been Sol Invictus, the sun, the invitation of the sun, the birth of the sun, that was celebrated in pre-Christian times on December 25th. And then there's also the Hanukkah, the Jewish celebration of the 8 days, where they were holed up and having enough oil for one night and lasted 8 nights. So that's why this time of year you see menorahs, or actually you see Hanukkahs, which have the 8 staves for the 8 days, and then a 9th one in the middle that's used as the eternal light that lights the 8 other candles. And even the Hinduism, the Diwali festival, is a celebration of light, the celebration of light overcoming darkness, of knowledge and truth overcoming ignorance, and of goodness overcoming evil. So all these things, I would say, all these religious traditions kind of sound like unplugging people from the Matrix. and turning them on with light. So let's talk about light for a moment, which all light originally emanates from the sun. And the sun has been an important symbol of light, of energy, of power. It is the source of all power and regeneration. And so the sun itself has been worshipped by many different religious traditions, especially in the earlier ones, the nature-based religions held by the indigenous people, venerated the sun as the source of light, and that there was even consciousness on the sun that was transmitted to people on earth who were in veneration of the sun. And even I understand that the pre-Islamic Arabia worshipped the sun up to a certain point, but then that was abolished by Muhammad, because a lot of these Abrahamic religions were moving away from nature religions and the veneration of different aspects of nature to get more on a personal Godhead, which brings us to the idea of a sun coming from the sun, an S-O-N coming from the S-U-N. And this is an idea, an image, a myth that is found in different cultures and different civilizations of a sun coming from the sun. And the word sun, S-O-N, literally means to give birth. It means the birth of something. And so the idea is that a sun has been born from the sun, or from the solar system, if you wanted to consider the whole arrangement of planets, that the solar system is, with its patterns, its cycles, the patterns are really the paternal aspect of the cosmos. Pattern, paternal, pater, father. That the father is out there off planet, and that the materia, the matter, the maternal mother of the earth, is the feminine aspect of the cosmos, of the divinity, so that in the interaction between the cosmos, the paternal patterns, and the materia of the maternal mother, something is born. A son, an S-O-N, is born. And I think from any perspective, that's miraculous. The fact that anything is born in the interaction of the planets and Earth. In the mythologies of the Christian religion and the different mythologies often speak of a miraculous birth, that somehow through a virgin or whatnot, a son is born from the sun. But I'd like to stop for a moment and just think, everything that's born really is miraculous. It's unexplainable. And to this day, science cannot explain how life comes about. Science still is stumped on how, out of inanimate matter, walking, talking, self-aware, sentient beings exist. How has that grown up out of inanimate matter? Well, it might be something to do with the fact that there's been something growing down as well. And that's really the picture of a sun being born from the sun. Something has been sent as the sun hero, as the solar hero, from off planet onto planet. So this sun hero, which we're talking a little bit about tonight, is something you could do further study on your own. People like Joseph Campbell, who a great mythologist, one of his books is The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and speaks of the different traditions and religions that present this idea of a solar hero appearing on Earth to save the people. So this coming down is an important gesture to consider, because the coming down from the cosmos onto Earth as what is the image of the Christ Son, Christ as the Son of God, coming down, but not only coming down to Earth, coming down into the valley of human need, and then also coming down in terms of dying and going into the grave physically, going into the pit spiritually, and as it's said in the New Testament, that he actually went into Hades and addressed the beings, the lower beings of the planet. So there's this dying that takes place in the Matrix. There's a number of deaths that Neo dies in Matrix 1, but comes back. He's resurrected in a Christ-like gesture. In Matrix 2, Trinity dies, his partner, but not before she sees the sun. She sees the literal sun, which we'll get into in a moment, but the sun has been blocked out because the sky has been scorched. And so nobody has seen the sun for a couple of hundred years. But when they're flying in one of the hover ships, they have to go up and they break through the clouds, and she gets this glimpse of the sun, and you see this light on her face, and all she says is, "Beautiful." I mean, it really is a moving moment for a human who had never seen the sun to see that. And then a few seconds later, the hover ship goes down through the clouds, and she dies after that, and is absorbed by Neo. So this idea of dying and coming back is part of this gesture of the sun hero, who, it's like the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell speaks of. The hero who's called, and he has to go down into the abyss and accomplish something on behalf of the people, and comes back and brings a boon to humanity as a result. So let's turn a bit more to the Matrix movie itself and what's going on. What's going on? What do we find out in the first movie? Well, that humanity is at war with machines. It's like the ultimate apocalyptic scenario, which some people say we're heading towards, with the rise of technology and artificial intelligence, that someday the balance will tip and technology, the machines, the programs will get the upper hand over humanity. Put up your hand if you've ever felt like you're at war with one of your machines or devices. Everybody, you know, like your smartphone, or your laptop, or your printer,
cars,
traffic
lights.
Yeah, you're just like, why isn't this thing working? You know, this thing's possessed and it's just trying to get the better of me. And then often you discover that it was just user error, right? User ignorance. And that's kind of the point right there, is that we are producing technology, we are producing devices and whatnot as a means to raise our own intelligence, to become more conscious. And there is a certain wrestling with the complexity of technology that is asking us to expand our consciousness, to expand our capacities, to wake up and use higher capacities within our means. So really that's been the case from the very beginning with the birth of technology, from the first spark of fire right through now to self-driving cars, which apparently people have seen here in the streets of Toronto. have not run into one as of yet. Oh, or I shouldn't use that terminology. I haven't seen one as of yet. But yeah, artificial intelligence is on the rise and becoming more and more ubiquitous. And you've got outspoken people like Elon Musk, who is, you know, the entrepreneur billionaire who has given us the Tesla car, who has come out and said that artificial intelligence is far more of a danger and threat to humanity than nuclear power or nuclear weapons. That's quite a statement. Like, okay, nuclear weapons are there, and AI is much more of a threat. Maybe that's why he's making plans to move to Mars and taking people with him. But it seems to me if you're going to be living on Mars, you're going to be even more dependent on AI. Everything's going to be AI on Mars. So there is this connection and reliance between humans and artificial intelligence that is growing. And I'll be referencing the work of Rudolf Steiner tonight. He's a spiritual scientist from previous century who developed a body of work called anthroposophy. Anthroposophy means the wisdom of the human being, the wisdom of life here on earth. And in a prophetic kind of way, himself has said that, yeah, there is a growing merging and interrelationship between technology, high tech, and the human being. But what does that look like? Because there is, you know, a certain movement and trend that is growing in popularity known as transhumanism. That is saying that humans will be able to replace, you know, all of our parts eventually, and that we will be completely merged with technology and machines. And in fact, our mind will be able to be immortalized within a computer. So yeah, like turning into cyborgs, in a sense, cyborgs where, you know, we're really more machine than human. So in that sense, technology really is running the show. It really has the upper hand in the transhumanist ideology. But this isn't really the image that Rudolf Steiner gives in his idea of the merging of humans and technology, because humans have something that machines don't. And in a word, we could say warmth. Warmth is something that humans have that machines don't. I mean, machines can get hot, you know, from fans going and motors and things like that. But that's not the kind of warmth I'm talking about. This is the kind of warmth that is found in warm-blooded animals that is very special, a very special essence. Why? Well, just like liquids carry nutrients in a plant, water flows through the veins of a plant, and air carries oxygen into an animal. The warmth in the blood of a human carries consciousness. This is a statement made by Rudolf Steiner, that the consciousness of a human is in the vehicle of the warmth of the blood that courses through our veins. And this may sound kind of mysterious and cryptic, and it's a bit of an oversimplification, but you can research it yourself, how this thing that humans have as warmth is really the basis for self-awareness and the I am consciousness So ironically, what do the machines want? The machine world in the Matrix. What do they need from the humans? Their warmth. The scenario is that at some point in human history, Morpheus is explaining this to Neo, that he's not sure who started the war first, but the sky got scorched, blocking out the sunlight, which was the source of energy for the machines in the machine world. They were running on solar power. So they felt threatened, so they needed to find an alternative source of energy. So they started looking at their creator, the human being, who is producing BTUs of warmth. And they found out a way to tap into the warmth of humans and created fields and a power plant where they could harvest humans and take that warmth to run themselves, turning humans into a copper top battery, which is why Neo is referred to as Copper Top by one of them in the first movie. So here we're starting to unpack some of the reality that's laid out by Morpheus as he is explaining to Neo, the protagonist of the story, what's going on. He introduces him to this desolate, war-torn earth, which he refers to as the desert of the real. That this world has become a desert, war-torn, and that humans have literally been forced underground. They've had to move underground more towards the center of the earth, where there's still enough warmth there for them to survive. And they have developed these hover ships that allow them to navigate the old sewer lines and so forth into what's known as the last stronghold of humanity, called Zion. Zion is this last, and Tank says to Neo, he says, Zion's where the party's going to be when the war is over. So where does this name Zion come from? It's really interesting in watching the Matrix Trilogy, because every name has been chosen very carefully. And every name often has multiple meanings and multiple ways of looking at it. Very, very fascinating. So, yeah, Zion is actually a hill. It's Mount Zion, upon which the first temple of Jerusalem was built. Zion was probably a pre-Israelite name named by the Canaanites for this mountain. And then when the Israelites moved there and began building the Temple of David, it was built at Zion, which is also known as Jerusalem. Jerusalem and Zion can be considered interchangeable. And what is Jerusalem? It's really Jeruth Shalom. Jerusalem means city of peace. It's a center or a city where, you know, this ideal of peace, like not just earthly peace, but a divine peace that can be experienced with humans connecting with the divine in Jerusalem, the city of peace. So, yeah, Morpheus is explaining that the Matrix, you know, this is the big question, what is the Matrix? He says it is a computer-generated dream world built to keep us under control in order to change a human being into this, a battery. And Neo, at that moment, it's a beautiful scene where just, you know, moments later, Neo tosses his breakfast because he can't really swallow the reality of this, like, because he's trying to grapple with what is reality, what is the Matrix, and what is reality. And Morpheus said, what is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know, the world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the real world as it exists today. Welcome to the desert of the real. So this Matrix is a program that's been developed by AI, the machine world, that is giving a dream existence to all these humans that are kept in the power plant and being harvested for their energy. And so along comes Neo. Neo is in the story. Now, who is Neo? He's obviously the central figure, the protagonist of the story. And Neo is his cyber name. That's the name, that's the handle that he uses when he's online. And when we first see him, he's asleep at his computer. His computer's on, he's got his head down, he's got headphones on, he's listening to music, probably pirated music, because he's a computer hacker, right? And then on the computer screen in front of him, we see knock, knock. Knock, knock, Neo. And this is Trinity. Trinity is hacked into his computer. And then we see the words, "The Matrix has you." The Matrix has you. But Neo is just his cyber handle. His real name is Thomas A. Anderson. And the name Thomas is interesting. Thomas literally means twin. Twin. That there's two-ness. And we hear that line out of Agent Smith's mouth when Agent Smith takes him captive and takes him down to the station, and he says, "We've been watching you, and we see you've been living two lives. One of them has a future, and one of them doesn't." So Thomas A. Anderson, then his last name, Anderson. Anderson, son of man. So he's son of man. He's like the everyman. He's like, you know, the everyday average Adam on the street. Just the everyman. But it's also interesting that that term son of man is also used in reference to Jesus Christ. When he's on earth, he's referred to this as the Son of God and also the Son of Man, right? Coming down, going up. And it puts this interesting dichotomy, you know, this Thomas, twins, between how someone who's an everyman could also be the savior of the world. It's a beautiful mystery in that. Thomas is also one of the disciples of Christ. Thomas was the one who was the skeptic around the time of the resurrection. He says, "I will not believe in this unless I see the nail prints in his hands from the crucifixion." He wouldn't believe. So here's Morpheus, and his name's interesting too, because Morpheus is the Greek god of dreams, and we get the word morphine from this Greek god Morpheus, which of course is the drug made from poppies that puts people under, or puts them into a dream state. And Morpheus is trying to awaken people from this digital dream world and unplug them from the Matrix. And he's actually Morpheus is the captain of one of these hover ships called the Nebuchadnezzar. Another interesting name. What's Nebuchadnezzar referred to? Nebuchadnezzar II was a Babylonian king who is referred to in the Old Testament in the book of Daniel. And Daniel had to go and help King Nebuchadnezzar to remember and interpret one of his dreams. And so, yeah, Morpheus is kind of like this prophet Daniel figure that is helping people to understand and break out of this digital dream world that they've been trapped in. And when he's starting to train Neo towards his mission, because he's not only like the prophet Daniel, he's also kind of like John the Baptist. John the Baptist was the forerunner of the Christ, preparing the people for this coming of this sun hero. And then when he arrived, he baptized him in the River Jordan as the beginning of his spiritual mission here on earth. And so Morpheus is something of that to Neo, preparing him for his mission as the One. And so he takes him into what's called the jump program. It's the jump program where he has to learn how to do a miraculous kind of jump. And says to Neo, you have to let it all go. He's really talking to Thomas, the doubter. He says, you have to let it all go, Neo. Your fear, your doubt, and disbelief. Free your mind. Free your mind, Neo. So, here's Neo beginning this journey of self-transformation. And he goes through stages of transformation. He starts as Neo the hacker, but then he is beginning to be referred to as the One by Morpheus, because Morpheus has been looking for this savior that had been prophesied by somebody earlier who had escaped from the power plant and said that someday there will be a savior come to save humanity and, you know, to lead in a war against the machines to victory. So he's being referred to as the One, which is interesting because one is an anagram of Neo. Neo becomes the One on this step to the next level. So he gets referred to it in this way in different places. Right in the beginning of the movie, when he has just woken up from sitting in front of his computer, and you know, Trinity is going knock knock. You know, the Matrix has you. Then there's a knock knock at the door, and somebody comes to buy some pirated software from him, and the guy is really thankful. And he says, "Hallelujah! You're my savior, man. My own personal Jesus Christ." At a later scene, he walks in on Cypher, who's sitting there just looking at the Matrix code, and he says, "Oh, I don't even see the code. I just all I see is blonde, brunette, redhead," which I think kind of implies he's sitting there watching internet porn in code. And Cypher says to Neo, he says, "So you're here to save the world. What do you say to something like that?" And then later on in Matrix 3, Bane, he says, "I wish you could see yourself, Mr. Anderson. The blind Messiah." Refers to him as the blind Messiah because he's extinguished his eyeballs with this electric cable. But in reality, at that stage, Neo, the One, doesn't need his physical eyes because his third eye has been awakened. There's been an awakening of the third eye, and he's able to see beyond the Maya, the illusion of matter, and he's able to see without the use of his eyes. He can see the world of light because he's become a light in the world. I think that's really interesting, to be able to see the world of light when you become a light in the world. And this talks about inner illumination or enlightenment. When we become illuminated within or enlightened, we're actually able to see things outwardly that we wouldn't normally see. And this is one of the stages in this book we're studying in the Spiritual Boot Camp, How to Know the Higher Worlds. It talks about the 3 stages: the stage of preparation, and then the stage of illumination, and then the stage of initiation. And this is what's really happening to Neo as he goes through the training with Morpheus to become illuminated within. So, who's this Cypher character? The Cypher character who is in the first movie. The name Cypher actually means 0. And he really is kind of a 0 type of person because he regrets being unplugged from the Matrix. He doesn't like life outside of the power plant. He says, why, oh why, didn't I take the blue pill instead of the red pill? Which we'll talk about in a moment here. He regrets being unplugged, and he wants to be plugged back in to the Matrix. This 0. And then in the next scene, we see him sitting with Agent Smith in the Matrix in a restaurant, and he's making a deal with Agent Smith to, like Judas, he's the Judas figure who's going to turn over Morpheus to the machine world so they can get the codes to the mainframe in Zion and take down Zion, the last stronghold of humanity.
Turn over Morpheus or turn over Neo?
He was going to turn over Morpheus. Yeah, because Morpheus has got the codes. Every captain of a ship has the codes to the mainframe of Zion. And so Cypher, this 0 Judas figure, is going to betray all of them, really. And he does, because he says, ignorance is bliss. He wants the blue pill. He doesn't want to know. And also when he's talking to Neo, he says, I'll give you a little piece of advice. If you see an agent, do what we do. Run. Run your ass off. He says, run. And we see Neo, he starts out as a 0, right? He starts out as a 0, but he's on his road to becoming a hero. When he comes into a confrontation with Agent Smith in the subway, there's some transformation taking place because he doesn't run. He doesn't run. He turns and he faces Agent Smith and goes head to head with him. Not only head to head, but he goes will to will. And he tries to defeat Agent Smith will to will. But he discovers he's not there yet. He doesn't have the power. He doesn't have the capacity to fight. And so he does have to run eventually. He runs and he runs into this apartment building, and there he gets shot. And he dies. But Trinity, outside of the Matrix, she kisses him, and he actually comes back to life, which is a big step. This is a big turning in his transformation, to go through a death and a rebirth based on the support of Trinity and Morpheus, who we'll talk about in a moment. But it's not through going will to will with these forces that he wins. But by dying and coming back in a higher form, that after that, his believing has shot up, and he's able to stop the bullets being shot at him. And he does run then, but he doesn't run from Agent Smith. He runs at Agent Smith, and he runs and dives into him, which is a big point in the plot, which we'll talk about in a moment, because he actually imprints. That's when he imprints something on Agent Smith and begins Agent Smith's transformation. He catalyzes something in Agent Smith that begins to escalate and escalate and escalate. And they continue this meeting, really what you could say between force and counterforce, or if you wanted to think of it spiritually, you could say between Christ and Antichrist, or consciousness and anti-consciousness. The same thing happens in the ending battle. We'll jump to towards the end of the story. I'm not doing this necessarily chronologically, but in the final battle between Neo and Smith, he's also trying to go head to head and will to will with him, and that just goes on and on and on, and it goes nowhere. So it's not until he surrenders his will. He surrenders his will and aligns with a different power that he's able to have victory over this counter force, this counter consciousness. So that shows really the culmination of his spiritual development and transformation, from the preparation stage to the illumination stage to the initiation stage, where he's self-realized. And I'll actually read the opening line from this book, Rudolf Steiner's book, How to Know Higher Worlds, and referring to this part of us, the capacities by which we can gain insights into higher worlds lie dormant within each of us. Mystics and Gnostics have always spoken of a world of soul and spirit that is as real to them as the world we can see with our eyes and touch with our hands. Listening to them, we can say to ourselves at every moment, I know that I too can experience what they talk about, if only I unfold certain forces within me that today still lie dormant there. All we need to know is how to begin to develop those faculties for ourselves. So the Matrix Trilogy is really the how. It lays out the how and the plot points. And it's not about a destiny per se. It's really a process of constant renewal, a constant renewing. And that's what the name Neo literally means. Neo means new from the Greek. And so it's a constant renewal, or being born again. Being born again and again and again. And there is that passage in the Gospels where Jesus is speaking to someone. He says, you must be born again. You were born the first time of water, and now you must be born again of spirit and of fire in order to enter the higher worlds. And that's what he's doing. He's being born again and developing different organs than just his physical eyes, which he eventually loses his physical eyes, but he's giving birth to higher organs of a higher nature, his spiritual nature, through this process of initiation. And when people go through these sorts of spiritual initiations, they're often given a new name. And Neo's given a new name. Instead of Thomas A. Anderson, his new name is Neo. It's a new name because the new name actually means new. So, absolutely new. And he's on the ship, the Nebuchadnezzar, and it's interesting. There's like just a little quick few seconds where you see a plaque on the wall by the door, and it says Mark 3:11, and it says made in the USA, and it gives the year and whatnot. And it's like, what's Mark 3:11? It's like you think it's like the version of the ship, like the name, the type of ship, like a Mach 1 or something like that. This is Mark 3:11, but it's actually a reference to a biblical verse, the book of Mark, chapter 3, verse 11, that is speaking about the Christ, and it says, unclean spirits, when they saw him, fell down before him and cried out, saying, thou art the Son of God. And this is the thing that's driving Morpheus in guiding this initiation. That he believes that Neo is this sun hero, the savior that was prophesied, and that the oracle has said is happening. Of course, we find out later on that this whole prophecy was a bunch of BS, that it was just another program of control developed by artificial intelligence to control humanity and eventually try to bring out complete annihilation of this stronghold. And so in the third Matrix, you've got Morpheus looking very forlorn, and he says the line, I have dreamed a dream, but now that dream is gone from me. When he loses his ship, the Nebuchadnezzar. He's actually quoting King Nebuchadnezzar from the book of Daniel, who said those words, I dreamed a dream, but now that dream is gone from me. But I want to continue with this journey that Neo is on. Morpheus takes him into another training program. This is the one where he's explaining, like everything is an illusion in the Matrix. And like all the people, doctors and lawyers and teachers and police officers, they're all plugged into this illusory world. And so they're all part of the system still. Even though they're humans that are living out a digital life in this digital dream world, they're plugged in to the program, and therefore they're part of the system, and then therefore they're not trustworthy. Until someone's awakened and unplugged from the system, he says they're our enemy. They're not trustworthy. So it's an interesting statement, because he's basically saying unless a person's awakened and unplugged from the illusion of Maya, the Matrix, we can't really trust humans. Humans are prone to error and folly because they're also being manipulated by a larger system. So who can you trust? Can you trust the oracle? Morpheus does trust the oracle. This oracle has perpetuated this idea about the prophecy of this coming of the One. And Morpheus, explicitly believes this, and he's been searching all his life for the One, so that he could help to set him on the mission. There's Trinity. Let's talk about Trinity. What does the name Trinity mean? Trinity means unity of three. And when we hear the word Trinity, it often we think of, in the Christian doctrine, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I suppose you could look at people that way. You could look at Morpheus as the Father, and Neo as the Son, and Trinity herself as the Holy Spirit. But I much prefer the interpretation that I heard in the research by Seth Miller. I recently discovered some work by Seth Miller, who is a student of Rudolf Steiner's work, Anthroposophy. And you can go look at his work. There's a PDF online called The Spiritual Matrix, an Anthroposophical Reading. And there's also a YouTube video of Seth Miller, The Matrix and Anthroposophy. It's about an hour long, or an hour and 20 minutes, explaining the Matrix from this Steiner perspective. And he talks about, Morpheus and Neo and Trinity really being representative of the thinking, feeling, and will capacities in the human being, right? Because we all have a threefoldness in our mental capacity, or you could say our soul capacities. We see physically we have a head, we have a heart, and we have limbs and metabolic system. That really physically represents the capacity to think, the capacity to have feelings, and the capacity to have a will, to have intention and willpower. And I think it's obvious that Trinity, as the female, she's the love interest of Neo, so she really represents the feeling life. She helps to bring out the feelings in Neo. And then you have Neo and Morpheus as the poles of thinking and will, and Trinity as the heart is in the middle that mediates. Mm-hmm. So that really is, this threefoldness that's at work here in this war against the machines. Then there is Bane. So we'll talk about Bane. He's introduced in the second Matrix film, and again, his name is interesting because, you've heard the expression, the bane of our existence. And he becomes that. He becomes, the bane of all existence. Because Agent Smith, after Neo imprinted on him, something new arose in Agent Smith as a program where he was seeking freedom as well. Mm-hmm. He was seeking freedom from the Matrix. And Smith
was seeking freedom from the
after Neo imprinted on him.
Yeah.
And Agent Smith learns how to imprint himself on other humans.
Even before, though, before you imprinted, no? Wasn't it before that he had said something like...
Yeah, he hates this place, he wants to get out.
Yeah,
yes.
He hates the smell of humans.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He's an AI.
Where,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, something was all... And he took the earpiece out of his ear, so he was like unplugging himself from the Matrix when he pulled that earpiece out.
But then ironically became even more connected with it?
Yeah, when Neo imprinted on him, then in Matrix 2, they have their first meeting there in the schoolyard. And he says, I don't know what happened. I'm a free man. He's increased in his power. He's learned how to copy himself onto other humans, other digital projections of humans in the Matrix. And we see how he multiplies himself over and over again. Gets into a big fight with Neo, and he just keeps multiplying himself. But then there's a big turning point where he imprints onto Bane, or he absorbs Bane. Well, he goes into Bane, and then Bane. This is while they're in the Matrix, and then Bane goes out of the Matrix through the phone line, because that's the way they travel in and out of the Matrix, on the phone line. So Bane goes out of the Matrix with Smith in him. So Smith has learned how to copy himself onto a human and exist outside of the Matrix.
Right. That's why the reader couldn't understand the
Yeah,
code.
there was very unusual code.
Different than he
Yeah.
used to.
Yeah. So this raises the question, can machine technology, can artificial intelligence exist in humans? the way Smith existed in Bane. Could artificial intelligence take over us from the inside, the way he took over Bane?
Is Mr. Smith, is he a virus?
Yeah, he's like a virus program.
Okay. It makes me think of Steiner's quote, if you're not in charge of your own will's capacity, something else will.
Yeah.
Take advantage.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Ugh.
So, I mean, it's a big question. We're heading down this road, you know, of transhumanism, where, you know, people are going to get chipped, people are going to have artificial this put in them, artificial that, nanotechnology. This is something I have firsthand experience with. When I got hit with Morgellons in 2012, brought on the delivery system of a bug and a bacteria. I can't go into the big details around this, but you can do your own research around Morgellons. It's thought that it is nanotechnology that comes in on the vector of a bacteria, of self-replicating nanotechnology that creates, out of the heavy metals in your body, to build an antenna within your system through your blood and hijacking on your electrical system, your nervous system, so that people infected with Morgellons with this nanotechnology are in fact being turned into living antennas that could potentially be manipulated and have, you know, mind control upon them from whatever, you know, Wi-Fi systems are there being developed by these black ops.
Morgellon is the name of a disease or disorder?
Yeah, Morgellons. Black operations are covert government and military operations that are doing things that the public are unaware of. And this is something I learned about the hard way back in 2012, and had to fight against this artificial intelligence taking over my system, and it was trying. I mean, bacteria already tries to do that. If you study bacteria, they work together as a cloud in the system to take over the host. And so, yeah, this is definitely a possibility that we are faced with, that artificial intelligence like Agent Smith, a virus, could be put into our system and take over. So let's change the subject a little bit here. Going back to when Morpheus and Neo first met in the room, and Morpheus is sitting there on his chair, and he asks, oh, and he's got the red pill and the blue pill, and he says, "Do you believe in fate, Neo?" And Neo says, "No. I don't like to think that I'm not in control of my life." So this brings up a really big subject about who or what is controlling your life. And it becomes a theme of choice. This word choice comes up several times later in the movie. And the very first choice that Neo's given is, do you want the red pill or the blue pill? And the red pill is the one that's going to take him down the rabbit hole of truth. And the blue pill is the one that he would take if he just doesn't want to go any further and just stop right there. But this red pill, this red, is interesting because red, it is symbolic of the Luciferic path. this Luciferic path that we learn about in the book of Genesis, when the serpent, came to Eve and said, you want to eat this nice red apple? Or whatever it was. Do you want to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Do you want to have your eyes open? And they ate it, right? Adam and Eve ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and their eyes were opened. So that's what this Luciferic path is that Morpheus is offering. Whereas the blue pill is to continue in ignorance, and one could say this is the Ahrimanic path. The Ahrimanic path, which will just allow him to continue in immersion of materialism and spiritual ignorance. And I'm going to be using these names a little bit more as we go, the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic. Luciferic is not exactly the way you may think it is from, its biblical origins, but Rudolf Steiner uses that as a way to refer to a certain path. And Ahrimanic, Ahriman is the name of a god from the Persian mythology, god of darkness who opposed the sun god, Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda was the sun god of the Zoroastrian tradition, and Ahriman was the god of the darkness on the earth and so forth that tried to block the light. So Ahriman and Lucifer, that opens the door for us to start to understand who is the architect. Friendly, they're not necessarily, like on good terms. We see that. Are working together to create a complex formula that is to bring about a balance in the matrix. This is what the architect is trying to do. He's trying to establish a balanced equation, a balanced formula of the matrix. And to quote the oracle, speaking about the architect, she says, as to unbalance it. Yeah. So the oracle is representing this Luciferic path that's always creating imbalance, that's always pulling us out of balance, whereas the architect, who represents the Ahrimanic and really the geometry of the earth and all of that, he's seeking balance. So the oracle and architect are working together, causing this balance and imbalance in the formula of the matrix. So when Neo comes to meet the architect, the one who created the matrix, we find out that this is the 6th time that a matrix has been made. It's the 6th iteration. And Neo has to go through this door of light to have this meeting with the matrix. And the architect explains that every time he created it, the program crashed. The first program he refers to as a harmony of mathematical precision. And he kind of gloats about it. It was like, perfection, mathematical perfection. But he says that humans kept rejecting the code in the digital dream world. They didn't like perfection. There was something about perfection that they wouldn't accept. So then he created another one that was based on the grotesque vagaries of human nature and behavior. It's a beautiful scene. If you see nothing else, just watch that architect monologue. But he says, even with that, the matrix crashed. There was something missing from it. And this thing that was missing was something that the oracle, as an intuitive program, was able to discover and contribute to the formula for the Matrix. And what that is, we will find out after we take a little break. The architect and the oracle, and how the two of them had colluded together in creating a program that would lead to complete dominance of humanity, and using humanity as a power source for their immortality, you could say. And how the previous 5 versions of the Matrix crashed because there was something missing.
Profound.
And how really the oracle and the architect are representative of the Luciferic pole that pulls us up and in fact inspires us in a way to learn and grow. And then the architect represents the Ahrimanic pole. These are terms used by Rudolf Steiner. The Ahrimanic pole tries to encase us and limit us in our development and keep us minimalized in our evolution. So in the development of the program, the oracle realized that the missing piece was a couple things. First of all, there had to be choice. That humans needed to be given a choice. Didn't matter really the choice, or even if it was at a subconscious level, but there had to be some sort of choice, and that there had to be motives like love that would inform these choices. So in terms of the oracle as the Luciferic character, part of the journey is overcoming the Luciferic temptation, which began, we see in the story in the Garden of Eden, this temptation that leads to inflation, because the Luciferic archetype is inflated. Lucifer wanted to be like the Most High God, and that's why that the archangel Lucifer was cast down to the earth, because of the inflation that was there, that is being perpetuated through human beings, human minds. And so Neo, part of his journey was to overcome this temptation to inflation. And part of that was to not buy into this idea that he was the one, that he was the savior of humanity. But it's very interesting how this plays out in the trilogy, because the Luciferic pole is a trickster. And we meet this in life. We meet this tricksterness in life. And this trickster thing is actually tricking us into learning about ourselves. That's what the Luciferic element does. It tricks us into learning about ourselves. And if you recall, when Neo went to visit the oracle, there was a sign above her door, the Latin words temet nois, which means know thyself. It's the words that were over the entrance to the temple in Delphi, the oracle at Delphi. Know thyself. And that's really what the oracle is tricking Neo into doing, is to know himself, to discover himself. And it's ironic that she is nothing what she looks like either. She just looks like a sweet little old lady who likes sweets. Baking cookies and eating candies. Like, she doesn't look like anything like you'd expect the oracle to look like, right? But that's the Luciferic impulse. That is the trickster, but it's working on us spiritually to trick us into getting to know ourselves. And that's exactly what happens to Neo. Thanks Lucifer. Thank Lucifer, because at first, in the first Matrix movie, she says, no, you're not the one. No, you look like you're waiting for a bus. Then, in the beginning of the second movie, she says, because you're the one. If you don't save Zion and defeat Agent Smith and all that, it's all going down. She says, you're the one. And he takes that on. But then when he goes and meets the architect, he realizes this whole prophecy, and well, both the architect and the oracle are just programs of the machine world. It's all a lie. And that there is no one. But he has to overcome, the temptation to think that he is the one. But nonetheless, he has this nemesis. He still has to face this nemesis, this counter force. You could say, as I said before, if he's representative of the Christ, there's the Antichrist. He's trying to develop his powers and his consciousness, and there's this force that's giving him something to push against. And in fact, at one point, Neo asks, who is this Smith that I'm having to deal with? And he is you. He is your negative. He is your opposite. She doesn't use the word shadow, but in a sense, that's it. It's his unconscious shadow that's manifested in the matrix, in the formula of things that he has to go against. But, that's what's giving him the motive to develop himself, which is referred to in the first epistle of John. This is where the terminology of the Antichrist is referred to in that first epistle of John of the New Testament, that he's able to work not only in the matrix, he's able to work in the larger world and its own right to exist. It's part of the program. Even though Neo has fear, and he says to Trinity, he says, I'm afraid. And she's afraid too. But they're completely 100% resolved to go ahead and do it. So there's this surrendering that takes place, and he goes to the machine world and actually then works with them. He says, this is in both of our best interests to stop Smith. And so there's this actually relationship, this partnership that is happening between the human and artificial intelligence to stop something that's actually become evil because it's out of balance. It's become evil. And this is his choice. This is where he's making the choice for himself to do it. It's not he's told that he has to do it or anything like that. So when he goes into battle with Smith, they're fighting head to head and will to will, and that's not sufficient to stop Smith. He then he surrenders and allows Smith to take over him. You know how he sticks his hand into Peter's chest and this black metallic liquid takes over, and then they become another Smith. But the caveat is that happened also to the Oracle. Smith went to the Oracle and put his hand in, and took over her. So when Neo and Smith are there in the pit, right? They're on this pit, this hole in the ground. The words coming out of Smith's mouth are actually the words of the Oracle. When she said, everything that has a beginning has an end. And Smith goes, wait, why am I saying that? What does that mean? There's something wrong. This isn't what I pictured. This isn't the right program.
Oh.
Yeah. All these people have actually, the Oracle primarily sacrificed herself to Smith so that she could help stop Smith. And what that is the redemption of Lucifer. This is an important concept I'm trying to bring out here, is that this Luciferic impulse, this Luciferic archetype, this Luciferic being, as a fallen angel, is something that humanity needs to redeem in our work. It's kind of a big concept I'm bringing out, but it's something that Rudolf Steiner emphasizes in his work, that it's not just an evil thing, it's something that's just in a certain state of transition that is going to be redeemed through humanity's work. And so the Oracle allowed herself, she sat there at the table and allowed Smith to take over, so that eventually when Neo and Smith were fighting, the Oracle's words came out of his mouth, which helped Neo to realize that he could do the same. He could allow himself to be taken over. He died, he surrendered, but then he was, from the inside of Smith, able to explode them all. He was able to explode them all, and that really brought an end to Smith. That was the end of the battle with Smith, and that ended the machines trying to take over Zion. That brought an end to the attack on Zion that was taking place. I'm going to read a quote here from Rudolf Steiner, who talks about the free choice between good and evil. If it were not possible for a human to sink into the abyss of evil, he would not have been able to attain what on the one hand we call love, and on the other hand freedom. Since to the seer, freedom is inseparably connected with the idea of love. It would be impossible for a human to develop either love or freedom without the possibility of going down into the abyss. A human unable of their own free decision to choose good or evil would be a being who would only be led on a leading string to a good which must be attained of necessity, and who had no power to choose the good of his own fully purified will by the love which springs from freedom. So in a nutshell, he's saying, we have to have that freedom to choose and to be moved by love in our choices, to face evil. And that's really what Neo accomplished. He was able to get to that high level, to choose to surrender his lower nature, his lower ego, the part of us that says, I gotta survive. I'm not going to the machine world, man. I'll never come back alive. He knew he wasn't going to come back alive, and so did Trinity. But he did it. It's interesting. There's the way he got to the machine world was he took Commander Niobe's ship. Niobe said, "You could take my ship." And Morpheus turns to her and says, "But you never believed in the one. You never believed in the prophecy." And she says, "I still don't." "Then why are you doing this?" said Morpheus. Niobe says, "I believe in him." And that's the point that Neo got to. Neo the hacker, who became the one for a while in Matrix 2 and then rejected that when he realized it was a lie, became Neo, the new one, the new transformed self on a higher level than he was in the beginning of the films by going through this. And that was a noble thing. Morpheus says to Neo just before he takes the ship, "I can only hope you know what you're doing." Because Morpheus no longer believed he was the one. And Neo says, "Me too. It was an honor, sir." And Morpheus says, "No, the honor's still mine." I love that line. It was so pure, just recognizing it was just a human being making a free choice out of love to face evil and to overcome himself first so he could overcome the evil in the world. There was the the objective of wanting peace. You know, when Neo went to the machine world said, "What do you want?" You know, he says, "We just want peace." And this is interesting because when we talk about our interaction with technology, some really interesting work out of Steiner's ideas and some new work being done by some people who are alive now around morality and technology. You can look up on YouTube. There's some fascinating talks on moral technology, and that our interaction with technology is not that we're going to merge with them physically, but that our moral nature will have an influence on machines, which may sound really weird, but if you can understand that what's behind technology and machines and what's behind electricity and energy, there's what Steiner refers to as sub-nature forces. Sub-nature forces. There's the forces of nature, but then there's sub-nature forces in electromagnetism, and this has a spiritual intelligence, and our moral nature can have an interaction, an influence on these sub-nature forces. This is very profound because technology is really, bottom line, they're amoral. It's amoral. They don't necessarily have a moral agenda. The only reason the war started was because they were able to calculate the fact that they don't have a power source anymore, and they figured that out, and that the only power source would be their own creator, the human being. That's what started the war. It wasn't that they had a moral agenda. But in the end, when Neo went to the machine world and he was in that virtuous state, he had developed his moral nature, he was able to interact with them. He was able to collude with them. The thing is that he had developed his moral nature by, this freedom to choose out of love and to not be manipulated by the architect in the Matrix. And it worked. It worked. And then after he died, Neo died, and he's lying there, and that big head comes up and says, "It is done." And those are the words that the Christ uttered on the cross, the last words he spoke before, that part of his initiation was over. And this brought about a balanced equation in the Matrix. So exciting that what Neo did, that balanced the equation, and so you could say all the code of life and all the patterns of the universe fell into place, and he was no longer an anomaly, as he was referred to, and that at that point we see, like in the last minute of the last film, the Matrix is reloaded again. The seventh time, which is so interesting because some of you that are in the advanced training know about Steiner's picture that the Earth has 7 incarnations. The Earth is going to go through 7 embodiments from old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, Earth. There's 7. And so the Wachowskis did an amazing job in embracing so much esoteric information that right down to this, that the Matrix gets reloaded for a 7th time. And there we see now the Oracle. She's lying there where Smith had fallen. Smith is gone, and now we see the Oracle's body's back, and she gets up. So there's this redemption of Lucifer, and the rain has stopped, and she's sitting on the bench, and the architect comes up. There's Ahriman and Lucifer, and architect says, "How long do you think this piece is going to last?" And the Oracle says, "As long as it can." The 7th Matrix can last indefinitely.
Mm.
And Sati is there, the little girl, is Sati there, and the sun's coming up. Now we've got the sun back. The sun is restored, and she said, I did that. I made it for Neo. She made the sunrise as an honoring of Neo, the sun hero, who gave his life. And Sati is the name of the wife of the solar god Shiva.
Mm-hmm.
Seraph comes up and says, did you always know? Did you know it would turn out this way? That, peace would be restored and Zion wouldn't be destroyed. And Oracle says, oh no, I didn't know, but I believed. And it's just so beautiful, this power of believing that really made it happen. So, just in closing here, we need this matrix. We actually need it. That's why a seventh matrix was created. The word matrix actually means womb or uterus. Matrix coming from the same root as matter or mother. So a matrix is a womb that engenders something, where something can grow, a place or medium where something is developed. So we don't actually want to get rid of the matrix. We decided to come here. We chose to come here. And as the Oracle said to Neo, you didn't come here to make choices. You actually came here to understand the choices that you already made. That's like the best line in the whole trilogy. We didn't come here to make choices. We came here to make choices that we already made in the bigger reality, in the bigger picture, on the spiritual level. We just need to understand why. Why did I choose to be male? Why did I choose to be born now? Why did I choose to be born here? Why am I choosing to do this? I need to understand. So it's in this matrix, this womb, that we're engendered the way a caterpillar is in a cocoon. This is like a cocoon that we're developing. And one day we're going to break beyond this as a butterfly with new powers that will allow us to transcend this earthbound nature of a caterpillar. And this is the true singularity. This is the true singularity and merging with technology. There's the book, The Singularity, written by the guy from Google, forgetting his name now. Kurzweil. How singularity is about humans merging with machines. Well, how far do we have to merge? We've always needed technology for our development. We've needed it for our physical body and whatnot. We've had technology that helps with our soul, our mental and emotional development. And we also have technology for the development of our consciousness and morality. That's why we're dabbling with very high-level technology right now, very high-level powers. It's challenging us to grow in consciousness and grow in our moral stature, to not get to the point where that technology has an upper hand on us. Because if we slip in our integrity and do something foolish, we're going to pay the price, and the technology is going to dominate, and it's going to hurt us and potentially take us down.
I've already been there.
Yeah, so this is why we need technology. It is a mirror of our inner development. That's the marriage. It's the marriage with a mirror, not putting nanotechnology in my veins and my blood, like Morgellons. So it depends if what we create, if we at the same time develop spiritual intelligence and virtue, that we not be taken down by our own devices. Our own devices. So, in the end, we are all called to be those sun heroes, to have that Christ consciousness, if you will, the solar consciousness, the higher consciousness, to be a light to the world, to be the one that we are waiting for. Relaxing into a meditative posture. Using a bowl that's got white gold. And gold is the mineral of the sun. So just bringing your awareness to your heart, your center of centers. And as you put your awareness there, feel a warming. Feel that warmth that exists within your heart. Warmth that emanates from the heart. Warmth that travels through your whole being, in your blood, reaching every cell of your physical body. And as you feel that warmth in your body, tune into the warmth of your soul. Soul warmth. Sense of comfort. Sense of peace. Sense of joy. Bubbling in your soul. Soul warmth. And then sense, as if on the horizon, the rising of a spiritual warmth. The rising of a spiritual sun. Rising within you. Being born in you. The sun, S-O-N, means to give birth. You're giving birth to inner sun, inner light, spiritual warmth. Feel how you hold that within yourself, incubating that warmth, that glowing light, an inner radiance. Just feed that with your awareness. See that sun rising more, glowing more strongly, radiating from within you and also without you. Beyond you, connecting with the light and warmth of the beings around you. Other rising suns emerging here in this cocoon, this chrysalis of earth. And sense how this is something that you've been waiting for. It is going to fulfill a high spiritual need that you've been waiting to feel fulfilled in. Allowing the intensity of that to grow greet it as if you are greeting the new day sun that is bringing transformational powers, that is going to transform the self and everyone and everything that you come into contact with. See this inner sun rising in the inner sky. And the sense of peace that comes with knowing that it is always there. It will never leave. It is permanent and eternal. Just holding your gaze upon that sun, see emerging from its center the butterfly. Butterfly emerging and flying off from that light center. The symbol of transformation. Symbol of the transformed self. A symbol of a higher state of being achieved out of the earthbound nature of a caterpillar. Allowing that butterfly to flit off in total freedom. Freedom of a higher nature. Transformed self. The birth of the new. The birth of the Neo in you.